Hello and welcome back to another update where I cover the latest developments throughout the front line in the Russo-Ukrainian war. It is your host Weeb Union, and in this one the Russians continued offensive operations within the southern, eastern and northern section of the front line. The Russians managed to advance west of Pokrovsk and in the southwestern outskirts of the Donetsk region, as well as within the Zaporizhia region and the Kharkiv region. The Ukrainians in turn counterattacked to the east of Pokrovsk in the direction of Mirnorod. Starting out in the southern section of the front line, the Russians are forcing the positions here to the south of Novodanilivka, pushing through the fortifications of the Ukrainians and pressuring the settlements from the south. Russians have been launching offensive operations here to the south of Novodanilivka, as well as in the vicinity of Melitokmashka for a few months, where they have slowly been progressing, gaining control of fortified positions bit by bit. These are limited attacks by the Russians to improve their positions and approach the settlements near Oryhov. With the pressure on the Ukrainian positions along the first and second lines of defense here within the Zaporizhia region, the Russians are now attempting to widen their offensive operations, fighting in the direction of Oryhov here in the southern parts towards Oryhov as a logistical hub for both sides. The Russians are here looking to gain control of both Oryhov and Huliaipole. In the Huliaipole direction, it is through pushing the fortified positions in the first and second lines of defense and attacking directly from the southeast and southwest. While in the direction of Oryhov, it is a combined push from the southern, eastern, and western directions as the Russians continue their pressure on the defensive lines of the Ukrainians. To gain control of these logistical hubs will significantly bolster the Russian offensive capabilities in the area and strengthen the offensive operations in the direction of the first and second lines of defense. Gaining control of Oryhov and Huliaipole would diminish the importance of the first line of defense, while the second line of defense will still stand strong, but with the push by the Russian forces on the eastern flank, it could weaken as well. With today's sponsor, Private Internet Access. With private internet access, you can hide your IP address and safeguard your internet activity through an encrypted tunnel, keeping your digital life private and protected. Using the internet without private internet access is like leaving your phone unattended. Everyone can sneak a peek at your notifications or worse. Whether you're at the airport, a coffee shop, a friend's house, or even at home, your data is vulnerable. While I've been covering this conflict and other conflicts, there is a lot of censored and unavailable information. With private internet access, I was able to bypass these restrictions and access the information regardless of the limitations that governments put on us. Private internet access helps protect your personal data by encrypting your internet connection through our world-class server infrastructure, which makes your information shielded and bulletproof. Private internet access works on all major platforms: Windows, Mac, Android, iOS, Linux, and more. Even better, one subscription lets you protect an unlimited number of devices, your whole household covered. Install it once, use it everywhere. Stay safe no matter where you are. Right now, you can get a special offer, 83% discount. That's just $2.03 a month, plus 4 months for free by going to peervpn.com/weebunion. Signing up for private internet access is risk-free. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee and 24/7 customer support is available. Protect your privacy today with private internet access. Click the link in the description and take control of your internet. On the eastern parts, the Russians continue offensive operations along the defensive lines of the Ukrainians. They have managed to gain control over Kumyshovacha on the southwestern outskirts of the Donetsk region and are pushing alongside the second line of defense. The Russians have made impact with several parts of the second line of defense here along the wedge on the eastern and southern flanks as they continue offensive operations to gain control over this part as well, which will continue offensive operations in the direction of Danilivka and the highway here further to the west. Gaining control over this portion will allow the Russians to flank the fortified positions of the Ukrainians in the first line of defense, gain control over a supply line leading towards the highway, which would then cut off one of the main supply lines for the Ukrainian forces within Huliaipole. This will split the reinforcements and supplies coming from the Ulyshev direction to the Hulyepol direction to keep the supply coming, and this would weaken the resupply capacity and capabilities of the Ukrainians for the defense of the settlement. In the direction of Pokrovsk, the Russians advanced to the west of the city, while the Ukrainians advanced to the east. In the western parts, in the direction of Molodetsk, the Russians started offensive operations following capture of Udashne through the forest lines and the road connected to the railway area. The Russians managed to gain a foothold in the southern parts of the settlement. Russians are looking to gain control over the border area, securing the western flank of Pokrovsk for future offensive operations further north in the direction of Serhivka and the industrial area to cut off the E50 highway and Hrushino from the south. At the same time, for a future push in the western direction through the railway area all the way to Myshova, which acts as a logistical hub for the Ukrainian forces and flanks the settlement of Novopavlivka to the south and opens up the road for Slovianka in the north. Therefore, a push by the Russian forces in the western direction is very reasonable if they are able to secure supply lines for their forces operating in the area. The Russian objective is to gain control over Novopavlivka, Myshova, and Slovianka along the border area, push in the direction of Hrushino, cutting off the E50 highway and Hrushino itself, which would completely cut off the remaining supply lines leading into Pokrovsk. According to the Russian forces operating within Pokrovsk, the Ukrainians are supplying their forces through the E50 highway going through the city. The main supply lines of the Ukrainians from Dobropilya in the north goes through Hrushino and then into the city. For the E50 highway, it is from the western direction into the city. That means all of the supplies for the Ukrainian forces operating within Pokrovsk and Mirnorod and the fortified positions to the south of the cities are all going through the E50 highway here in the western parts of the city. This means the Russian offensive operations taking place here along the E50 highway and within the central parts of the city could cut off these supplies going towards Mirnorod and the fortified positions to the south of the cities, leaving all of the positions of the Ukrainians operationally circled within the entire eastern parts. The Russians just reported a Ukrainian armored convoy going to Mirnorod, likely to support their offensive operations in the eastern direction, but it raises the question, why are they pushing in the eastern direction towards Mirnorod when the Russian forces are pushing through to the central parts of the city? It is likely due to the fact that the Ukrainians still want to hold their positions on the flanks, despite the Russian push that endangers their supply lines, to try and hold these positions for as long as possible, while also building up an additional counterattack in the direction of the south of Pokrovsk. In either case, continuing offensive operations in the eastern flank of this pocket is risky when the Russians are storming the city itself. The Ukrainian positions here in the eastern parts are seeing multiple counterattacks in the direction of Novokonovishne, where they're looking to regain control over the settlement. Ukrainian forces raised the flag within the central parts of the settlement, but heavy fighting continues within it, meaning that there is no secure control by the Ukrainians within it. Instead, they have managed to recapture the fortified positions to the south and the western outskirts of Novokonovishne, while they are also storming the industrial area with the Da Vinci Wolves. And while some of these Ukrainian brigades are a lot on the internet doing PR stuff, and some even Ukrainian soldiers call them TikTok warriors, these are just the PR people for these brigades. These are typically brigades that are well funded, especially by international donations, which allow them to have good equipment, and it also makes them popular among volunteers. That means that they can pick the best of the best, which typically means that these brigades that are doing a lot of PR are typically also brigades that are well trained and well equipped. That means some of the best Ukrainian brigades are fighting over the industrial area and Novokonovishne right now, despite the Russian offensive towards the city itself from the south. Moving on to the northern section of the front line in the Kharkiv direction, the Russians continue offensive operations along the Usk River line, where they managed to gain control over additional forest patches here west of Topoli and north of Kamyanka. The Russians are slowly expanding their offensive operations along the Usk River line to gain control over the border area connected with their forces in the Milova direction, gaining control over a wider portion of the border area, especially if they're able to gain control over the settlements and the roads connecting the Vorishna with Kamyanka and Milova. The Russians will be concentrate a lot more forces in this section of the front line for further offensive operations along the highways and in the northern and western directions. Such offensive operations is a build-up by the Russian forces for further offensive operations here in the northern section of the front line, both in the Kharkiv region and in the Sumy region. In the direction of Kupiansk, the gray zone has been expanded as heavy fighting takes place within the entirety of Moskovka. The Russians are here looking to solidify their control over the settlement, while the Ukrainians are constantly counterattacking to kick the Russian forces out of it and then push them out of Kupiansk itself. Heavy fighting taking place along this section of the front line. Further south in the direction of Udashne, here west of Pokrovsk, the Ukrainians are also attempting some counterattacks to re-enter Udashne as positional fighting continues along the railway area here on the southwestern supply line into Pokrovsk. There's a lot of heavy fighting taking place within the Pokrovsk section of the front line, with the Russians and the Ukrainians concentrating a significant amount of forces within the area. While if previously the Russians, with their operational encirclement process towards the city, the Ukrainians did not have a strong concentration of forces, but were mainly relying on FPV drone strikes, the Ukrainians have now solidified their garrison, sent a lot of reinforcements to hold direct firing positions, and slow down the Russian forces by fighting them face to face, similar to the battles within Bakhmut. As for some political updates, there's an interesting post where the Russian Minister of Defense had a meeting where Gerasimov and some other top-tier military generals with the Minister of Defense were speaking with each other, and in the background there was a map. This map included the 4 regions in the south of Ukraine with a separate border to Ukraine itself, and this border also included the Mykolaiv and Odessa regions. And it is an interesting map to hold on the wall of a meeting within the Ministry of Defense. Then a member of the Russian parliament, the State Duma, stated that naturally Mykolaiv and Odessa are also goals of this war. If that is taken into context and we see the current situation along the front line, the map stated the current positions not along the Kharkiv direction, excluding the Kharkiv direction, but including Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, as well as Mykolaiv and Odessa regions under Russian control. This would require a significant portion of Russian forces fighting across the Dnieper River. But if I am to be honest, I believe that this is rather the Russian Ministry of Defense simply trolling everyone. But it is not unrealistic that the Russians will expand their goals of the war if they manage to achieve the 4 regions and the war does not end, and not limited to Mykolaiv and Odessa, but also the Dnieper region, the Kharkiv region, the Sumy region, and other regions of Ukraine could be considered as well. And that is going to be all for this update. Thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, check out my Patreon and YouTube membership for additional content. Thank you for watching and have a great day.